Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's explainer, where we're going to unpack what is literally one of the most baffling, dramatic, and haunting events in modern history. We're looking at the mystery of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370. Even today, years after the event, just hearing the phrase MH370 instantly gives you this sense of profound disbelief. I mean, how does something so massive, so technologically advanced, simply vanish? We're going to walk through the timeline, the evidence, and the theories to understand exactly what we know. And honestly, what's even more terrifying, what we still don't. I want you to set the scene in your mind. It's just a routine evening. We've got a state-of-the-art Boeing 777 packed with 239 passengers and crew members, heading out on a standard red-eye flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. Remember, this isn't the early Wild West days of aviation. This is the 21st century. Satellites are tracking the weather, radar watches every single movement, and computers are talking to other computers across the globe in actual milliseconds. And yet, this colossal machine, weighing hundreds of thousands of pounds, completely disappears into the night sky, severing all connection to the world below. It honestly feels like something ripped straight out of a Hollywood thriller, but tragically, it is absolutely real. Now, because of the sheer unimaginable drama of this vanishing act, the internet and the media have basically been flooded with wild speculation. But for our purposes in this explainer, we have to stop and ask, is it actually possible to separate the facts from the fiction? Well, yes, and that is exactly what we're going to do today. We're totally stripping away the unproven sensationalism and looking strictly at the hard facts, the official investigation reports, and the verifiable evidence. We're putting this whole mystery right under the microscope to see what the data actually tells us. Section 1, the minute-by-minute timeline. Let's move to this and see exactly how this builds. To really grasp the magnitude of this disappearance, we have to start at the very beginning and map out the exact sequence of events. The timeline of MH370 is chilling precisely because of how incredibly normal it was, right up until the literal second it wasn't. The flight commences completely routinely, the plane reaches its cruising altitude, then, right as it approaches the edge of Malaysian airspace, air traffic control hands the flight over to Vietnam. The cockpit radios back, "Good night, Malaysian 370," and that's it. That is the final radio transmission. Moments later, the plane's transponder is deactivated. It simply drops off civilian radar screens entirely. But here's the crazy part. The timeline doesn't end there. Anomalous military radar later reveals a massive twist. The plane didn't just crash right there. It actually made a sharp, dramatic turn back across the Malay Peninsula, flying in total silence through the dark before heading south. Section 2, the hard evidence. That silent, unexpected turn transforms this from a tragic accident into a profound mystery. But listen, every massive puzzle leaves behind at least a few pieces of hard data, and we aren't relying on guesswork here. So the crucial point is, when you strip away the rumors, investigators are basically working with these specific categories of hard evidence. We've got satellite data provided by a company called Inmarsat, those military radar findings tracking that bizarre turn we just discussed, the eventual discovery of confirmed physical debris, the analysis of cockpit simulator and flight data, and of course, the incredibly exhaustive official investigation reports compiled by international teams. This right here, this is our foundation. Out of all of that data, this one piece of digital evidence is probably the most critical, and honestly, the most eerie. We're talking about the Inmarsat handshake data. So check this out. Even though the plane's main communication systems were totally turned off, a satellite terminal on the aircraft continued to automatically ping or handshake with an Inmarsat satellite high above the Indian Ocean about once an hour. These little automated electronic pulses, they're the absolute main reason investigators know the plane didn't just crash immediately after losing radar contact. It kept flying, literally like a ghost ship in the night for hours. By mathematically analyzing the delay and the frequency shifts of those tiny satellite pings, scientists were basically able to draw arcs across the globe. And this led to a massive shift in the search operation. Suddenly, they weren't looking in the South China Sea anymore. The data pointed to one of the most unforgiving, vast, and completely remote environments on the entire planet, the southern Indian Ocean. The tension here is just unimaginable. You're trying to find a needle in a haystack, except the haystack is a violently storm-tossed ocean stretching for millions of square miles, and you're armed only with a handful of automated digital pings. And for the longest time, the ocean yielded absolutely nothing. Until, finally, the shock of reality hit. Confirmed pieces of debris actually began to wash ashore on these distant beaches in the western Indian Ocean, places like Reunion Island in Madagascar. We're talking about a flaperon from the wing, actual pieces of the cabin interior. This was a devastating, tangible confirmation the aircraft had, without a doubt, crashed into the ocean. It was a vital piece of the puzzle. But here is the painful catch. While it confirmed the where, it completely failed to answer the why. Section 3. Analyzing major theories. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we can put these theories on trial against the evidence. Because human nature constantly demands an explanation, dozens of theories have popped up over the years. Let's impartially examine the most prominent ones and weigh them right against the actual data, starting with the theory of pilot involvement, the idea that someone in the cockpit intentionally diverted the plane. Now, the evidence here is really complex. On one hand, data recovered from a home flight simulator showed a plotted course deep into the southern Indian Ocean, which definitely suggests possible intentionality. However, the official investigation reports completely contradict this as a definitive conclusion, stating very clearly that there is zero psychological or background evidence to suggest the pilot would ever commit such an act. So the data just violently pulls us in two completely different directions. Then there's the hijacking theory. The main thing supporting this is the military radar finding. The aircraft pulled off these deliberate, complex flight path changes that require some serious, extensive piloting knowledge. It wasn't just drifting randomly at first. But when we balance that against the contradicting evidence, the logic kind of strains. Think about it. There were absolutely no distress calls, no demands were ever made, and no group ever came forward to claim responsibility for taking the plane. A hijacking with no motive and no message? That is extremely difficult to reconcile. So what about a catastrophic event? Maybe a sudden electrical fire, a massive mechanical failure, or a rapid decompression event that causes hypoxia, knocking the crew unconscious. I mean, this would definitely explain the sudden loss of radio contact and the transponder failing. But we have to pit that right up against the Inmarsat satellite data. A devastating fire usually brings an aircraft down relatively fast. It is incredibly hard to align a catastrophic structural or fire event with a plane that somehow stabilized and then just continued to fly on autopilot for another 6 to 7 hours. It just doesn't quite fit. So why are we still in the dark here? Why has literally no single theory been definitively proven to this day? Well, it all comes down to these exact roadblocks. We have conflicting interpretations of the very limited flight data we do possess. We completely lack the man wreckage of the fuselage, and most crucially, the black boxes. The cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder, they remain lost in the absolute depths. Without those specific, localized physical clues from the core of the aircraft, every single theory ultimately just hits a massive brick wall of uncertainty. It's like we have a giant puzzle, but we're missing all the centerpieces. Section 4, What Remains Unknown. It's a really haunting reality to process that the core of this case remains totally unsolved. I mean, despite having the most advanced technology in human history right at our fingertips, despite international cooperation and hundreds of millions of dollars spent, the central mystery endures. But the search for the truth hasn't stopped completely. Even though the primary official investigations have largely been suspended, we're actually seeing recent independent search efforts stepping up. You have marine robotics companies proposing these wild, no-find, no-fee expeditions using incredibly advanced underwater drones. Meanwhile, oceanographers are constantly evolving their drift models. They're studying exactly how those pieces of debris traveled across the Indian Ocean to try and narrow down a new, way more precise potential crash zone. So the science is absolutely still actively working on this. And this brilliantly illustrates the terrifying paradox we're left with. Just look at the stark difference here. We know the initial flight path. We have the satellite data confirming its hours-long journey south. We even have the physical debris confirming its tragic end. We possess these undeniable hard facts, but towering over all those facts is the massive, gaping void of the unknown, the exact coordinates of its final resting place. And the human element, the why. Why did it turn? Why did it go completely silent? Which really brings us to the most chilling, evidence-based question of all. A question that continues to haunt the entire aviation industry and, of course, the families of the 239 people on board. In an era where our phones track our literal every step, where satellites map the globe in real time, how does a massive commercial airliner just stay hidden? It is such a powerful, humbling reminder of the limits of our technology and the sheer vastness of our planet. The mystery of MH370 is far from over.